Hey, what's going on, roleplayers? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. It's another Sub Sunday, and today's highest upvoted comment is: maybe do a one-shot build with Rogue Assassin and other things. It would be cool to see what you could come up with and to see how much turn 1 damage it could pull off. This isn't an easy task because the game is designed in such a way to prevent you from doing too much damage in one single turn. And if you do want to go down that route, you do have to outsource from a lot of other different classes. So ultimately, in the end, you end up being less versatile a character. I'm reluctant to call this a build either, because it's not really the kind of route you're going to want to take a character down. It's just a lot of theory crafting, and I think that's perhaps what we're going to look at, is just the theory and what kind of numbers you can get from various classes and various abilities. So let's just go over some of the obvious ones and then put them all together and just see what kind of numbers we can come out with. Okay, so we're going to put some caveats on this. It's going to be one attack, over one turn, no setup rounds, and no outside help. So the starting suggestion was Rogue Assassin. So with your sneak attack, you can get anything from 1d6 for level 1 all the way up to 10d6 sneak attack damage for 19 and beyond. So the Assassin Rogue obviously starts with Assassinate, which is going to give you advantage against any creature that hasn't taken an action. And if you hit with that attack, it's an automatic critical hit. So this is a really good starting point, because as we're already aware, critical hits double the amount of dice that you're using. So this is a really good start. Potentially, for the Rogue Assassin on its own, it could have up to 20d6 damage from sneak attack by itself. Both Paladin and Blade Pack Warlocks have the ability to use smite attacks. However, even though they'll do roughly the same amount of damage for the same level of slot, it's a very big difference between the levels at which they get the ability to use it. The Warlock can pull off 6d8 damage by the time he hits level 9, whereas the Paladin needs to get to level 17 before he's got a 5th level spell slot that will allow him to do the same thing. Furthermore, when you compare levels between the Rogue and the Warlock, the Rogue will have 5d6 damage for his level 9 sneak attack, as opposed to the Warlock, who will have 6d8 damage for his level 9 Eldritch Smite. That Eldritch Smite is doing anywhere between 6 to 48 damage, as opposed to the Rogue, who's doing anywhere between 5 to 30 damage for the same amount of levels. As it is, it might just be worth getting to the point where you have the highest level spell slot possible for a Warlock, and then capping off your Warlock progression there, and then continuing down the Rogue route for a while. So for a max level character, we're already looking at between 12 to 84 damage for a regular hit, and 24 to 168 for a critical. That's an average of 96 points of damage, which is already an amazing start for a single attack, and we haven't even factored in anything else other than the smite and the sneak attack. So we're going to start adding in some pluses now. We're going to assume the maximum score for either your dexterity or perhaps your charisma if you're using a hexblade. Dueling is going to give you an extra 2, and of course improved pack weapon is going to add 1 more onto that as well. Now cantrips like Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, as part of the casting you're allowed an attack. Now it's basically you're casting a spell, so you're not making attacks and then adding something on. You're casting a spell and getting a free attack with it, for those of you who don't know. So you're only going to get 1 use out of this cantrip per turn, no matter how many attacks you might have. But considering we're going with a one-shot build, 1 attack is all we're going to need. So Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade are going to be absolutely perfect for this. Alright guys, we're not doing bad. We're almost up to 200 damage for an average roll, so we are really getting close. But what else can we pull out of this character? So you probably don't see a lot of Orc Rogues or Orc Warlocks running around, well, unless you're playing World of Warcraft or something. The point is, however, Orcs get the Savage Attacks ability, which gives them an additional dice of damage on their critical hits, as well as the Orcish Fury feat that they could take, which allows them to have another dice of damage. Your Rapier damage is doubled, your Orcish Fury damage is doubled, and you get an extra d8 on top of that, giving you a total of 5d8 just from the weapon attack alone. In order to use both Booming Blade and Sneak Attack, we're going to end up using a melee weapon that has the Finesse quality. So we're already well over 200 damage for an average roll, and it's probably a good stopping point here if you want a practical character that you can use for genuine gameplay. This should be more than enough to deal with anything the DM has to throw at you, but since we're playing with house money, can we actually get something else out of some different classes? Do you know what I wanted more than anything for this particular request? It was vulnerability. And the only way that I can find to get vulnerability at the moment, without using high level spells and from just using general abilities, is to use the Grave Cleric. However, that ability requires a whole action in order for you to use it. So how am I going to get an extra action out of this? Well, I'm going to have to go with a few levels of Fighter in order to get the action surge, but if I'm going to go with at least 2 levels of Fighter, I might as well go with a 3rd just to get the Battle Master technique, in order to get myself an additional dice of damage anyway. So I'm going to have to drop a few rogue levels in order to put these levels in. So what I'm going to end up doing is losing 3d6 damage from my sneak attack. However, I'm going to add an additional dice of damage from my Battlemaster technique, as well as gaining vulnerability, which I can then use to double all the damage that I'm doing. So these aren't practical character advancements, they're just there to illustrate the challenge that was set for me. And the point is, just how much damage can you do by sacrificing a few dice in order to gain vulnerability on a creature. So working on the assumption we're going with the surprise attack to get the automatic critical hit, the assassin gets anything up to 36 damage, the hexblade gets anything up to 96 damage, the battlemaster can get up to 16, the rapier will be up to 24 because the orcish savage attacks, the orcish fury adds an extra possible 16, booming blade can get up to 48, and banishing smite can add an additional 100 points of damage at a maximum roll, with a +8 to all of that from your extra pluses from things like dueling, improved pack weapon, and your ability scores. Before we make this attack, we can use our action surge in order to use our channel divinity. This will give us vulnerability on our target, so we've got advantage on our attack roll, an automatic critical hit, vulnerability on the target, and all our other spells and effects going into the mix as well. The maximum possible damage we can do for this one attack is 688 damage. So with just one attack on a surprise round, with no additional help from any outside sources and no setups, we can actually get up to 688 damage at the total maximum roll. Now I tried a lot of different combinations for this. I tried to use Green Flame Blade and loop it back into attacking yourself in order to proc your absorb elements, in order to get you additional damage that way. I tried using familiars and stuff in order to, again, deal some damage to you in order to proc your absorb elements, but unfortunately I just couldn't get it to work because of the attack restrictions. And the only other way that you could do it would be to have someone on your party initiate some kind of elemental attack against you in order to get that additional damage, because it's a reaction that you're not using as well. And that would be the point, to make full use of your action economy. So we've used our bonus actions, we've used our additional action, we've used our main action. You're going to have to move to your target. We have a reaction free that we could use, and the best thing I could find was absorb elements. But unfortunately I just couldn't find a way in order to provoke it by doing something myself. Even if I could get an outside influence to deal me some elemental damage in order to proc my absorb element spell, I would have to go up to something like level 11 in order to get enough spell slots to actually use it as well, because I've already used both of my warlock slots for banishing smite and eldritch smite. So by adding warlock levels I'd have to lose in rogue levels. I'd probably then need to add an extra level of wizard or something in order to actually get the spell that I want, and in order to get that I'd probably have to drop a level of fighter or something. So you could really get a lot more damage out of it, but you have to add so much extra stuff in, and you're dealing yourself additional damage in order to get a small bonus on top of that. So you can get more out of it, it's just, are you willing to make the sacrifice when it comes to A, levels, and B, your character's health. I also didn't factor in the additional damage the target takes from moving after being struck by Booming Blade. Chances are the thing isn't going to be standing anyway, but even if it was, again, there's no guarantee that the creature will move, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get that extra damage either. So this is an unusual project for me because I'm not a power gamer, and it is interesting just to see how much damage you can calculate, but it's not something I would want to play for this specific purpose. However, what I want the takeaway to be from this is to see how you can kind of add certain classes together for compound effects, which makes some relative sense. So the fighter and grave cleric combination, using your action surge in order to get the channel divinity to work, and then you can use certain things like Great Weapon Master. You can have a big two-handed attack, perhaps you could go with a ranged attack, perhaps you could go with a finesse attack. There are different ways in order to use it. So, it shows you the benefit of a, say, fighter-cleric multiclass. If you wanted to go with something pretty crazy, where you're not really worried about hurting yourself, then again, you can use things like Green Flame Blade, loop that damage back to you, then get yourself some absorb elements, and then you can actually prime your next attack to do even more damage. So I had to go through all these sort of different variants and different ideas in order to get the potential to do as much damage as I could, but by doing it, I actually found some really odd ideas and some just real interesting ways of using the abilities and actually coming up with varying different character concepts for them. Again, another idea was the Warlock Rogue Master Sneak Attack variant. I also had to weigh up the differences between actually making attacks and perhaps using retributive attacks from things like Armor of Agathis and Hellish Rebuke and Fire Shield and things like that. But again, those didn't quite work. But they were interesting character concepts that make the character work in specific ways. As I said before, I'm not really the kind of person who builds a character in order to do the most damage it can. What I tend to do is, if I'm doing any damage calculations for you guys, it's so you can understand your role better. Even though this is not the sort of thing that I would do myself, being challenged with this particular kind of character has kind of given me some insights and given me some ideas of just different ways in which I can use certain class abilities and different character concepts, and it's given me some really good ideas for, you know, characters of my own and different genres and different backgrounds and different abilities. So it has been valuable. Even though it's just how much damage can you pull out with this character, it's actually given me ideas for, you know, 4 or 5 different possible NPCs who might turn up in my future games. So there is always value in looking down these routes. Even if it does seem one-dimensional, you can actually find something that can be of much greater value than just the raw numbers. So no doubt I missed out on a ton of other options that I could have put into the character. However, I don't have all of the books, I don't have all of the source material, and there's just so much stuff to read through and you can't remember everything. So I mean, if you guys have ideas, if you have potential add-ons or potential takeaways from this concept, then be sure to write them in the comments down below. Also guys, if you want specific things for the next Subscriber Sunday, be sure to put them in the comments down below. Highest upvoted comment will be the focus of the next Subscriber Sunday. Also be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.